everyone. It's Dave and Darren. We're your two old bloggers. Been talking publicly about the Minnesota Vikings for over 2.5 decades apiece, and that's a lot of commenting. Have we been right the whole time? Sure, we have. If you believe that, I got a bridge in Arizona to sell you. Anyways, but we do enjoy it. So today we're going to talk some more, and we've got some interesting topics to hit today. Theme one is going to be, can Kevin O'Connell repeat? First step to becoming elite. And T-Bass, that's what I meant by the title. Can the Vikings become an elite team? And we'll describe what it's meant by being an elite team. But first off, it's going to mean making the playoffs at least 2 years in a row. Then we're going to get into This Week in Vikings Land. And we've got a few topics there. We're going to look at the rookie minicamp that's going on. We're going to look at Daniel Jones and the Vikings' decision to pull the offer on him. And also, we're going to be looking at what Kevin O'Connell said about Aaron Jones. What's it all mean? Finally, theme 3, we're going to do an NFL draft reality check. What does that mean? It means every pick we get is going to go to the Hall of Fame, of course. Be a starter. All next on Two Old Bloggers. Let's rock! Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. Hey, Darren, how's things in the Great White North?
Things are looking up, Dave. It was like 14 degrees Celsius yesterday. Forget what that is in Fahrenheit. Sun was shining. People were outside. You'd think that it was like it was summer or something. And you know that you can tell one way you can tell you're talking to a Canadian is if they bring up the weather.
It's a hot topic down here too. So don't worry about that.
Yeah. So things are good, but moving still in progress for you, I understand.
Yes. Oh, it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
The moving company still hasn't located a truck to haul our stuff up to Missouri. And so it's I'm a little bit perturbed, but in the meantime, made camp down in daughter's basement once again. So we are it is what it is. Now, I do want to welcome everybody that's come to the show today. We got Dalton Gary. I hope you're doing well, brother. Mr. Bob Sweet. Hi, Bob. Julian. Northfius. Biggs. Good to see everybody. Raymond, of course. And who else did I miss? Of course, T-Bass, who I've already acknowledged, because T-Bass has some points that are pretty good ones, as well as Chuck. Welcome to the show, guys. Now, we titled this one KOC's Challenge. Can he repeat? And by that, you meant, can he make the playoffs 2 years in a row? And we're going to be talking about how long has it been since the Vikings actually did that?
Too long.
Next in theme 1. Can he make the team elite? What's the first part of being elite?
I guess everybody's definition would be different, but I think part of it is making the playoffs consistently. And I got to thinking about this because Kevin O'Connell and Dalton mentioned his regular season record in the comments a little ways up, but Kevin O'Connell has gotten a lot of positive buzz as a head coach in the 3 years he's been at Minnesota from us and from national media, local media, other fans. And the reason for that is, one, his regular season record, 34-7 in 3 seasons. Had a 13-win season, had a 14-win season. He has one NFC North divisional title to his record, made the playoffs twice. And on top of that, he's also developed a really player-centric team culture that the players who have played that are on the team now, and also those who have played from but aren't on the team now, they all praise that culture and Kevin O'Connell and the coaching staff for the most part. And he's made the place, the work environment, a place where players want to be, whether they're with the Vikings and even guys who aren't with the Vikings now. They recognize that this is a top place for an NFL player to go. So that's all good. But I think the next stage, so he's laid a great foundation there, Dave, but the next stage that he has to take is to get the Vikings to that, I think, elite level of an NFL team where they're consistently in the hunt for NFC championships and the Super Bowl. And that's going to be, of course, the much harder part of his job now, as he's got to go beyond just making the playoffs, I think, and make us an elite team. And I think part of that is, again, getting us there is making the playoffs consistently year after year after year, which the Vikings have not done since 2008 and 2009, when a guy who wasn't a very good head coach, Brad Childress, was the CEO of the Minnesota Vikings. That's the last time the Vikings have made the playoffs 2 years in a row. That's almost 20 years ago, a long time. And so, juxtapose that. And during this period from 2008, 2009 to where we are today, heading into the 2025 season, Dave, the Vikings have been a solid franchise. They've won some divisional titles. They've generally been competitive. They've had some strong years like 2017, last year, but they haven't been mentioned consistently as like an elite NFL team. Unlike, say, take a look at the Buffalo Bills, for example. They've made the playoffs 6 straight years now, and 7 of the last 8. The Kansas City Chiefs made the playoffs 10 years in a row now. And then you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, have made the playoffs 7 of the last 8 seasons. And both the Chiefs and the Eagles have both won multiple Super Bowls during that stretch. The Bills have not won the Super Bowl, but they've been knocking on the door and have been at the AFC Championship level several times. So that is the level that Kevin O'Connell needs to take the Vikings. And that's going to be difficult. But I think if you look at the roster and what they have done, particularly this offseason and building it in the past 3 years, this, again, we talked about it last week, this is a very strong roster on paper. And the Vikings addressed weaknesses on the offensive and defensive lines in free agency and in the draft to make that roster even stronger and fortify it. So looking at that, heading into 2025, the roster is strong. But again, I was thinking about what are the factors, what are the things that are going to happen for Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings to, again, first off, make the playoffs for the second season in a row for the first time since 2008, 2009, and get us to, and from there, I think you build to being that elite team, consistently making the playoffs, winning division titles, challenging for the championship game, and challenging for a Super Bowl. I think there's 4 factors that, to me, and anybody can chime in on what they think the others are, but there's 4 that I think stand out. The first is, unfortunately, for Kevin O'Connell, is one I don't think he has a lot of control over, particularly this year's, is good health. The Vikings last year were the very, very healthy team. Yes, we lost Christian Jerisaw very early in the season for the entire year, and that was a big blow that the Vikings weathered quite well until at the end of the year when things fell apart. But besides him and TJ Hawkinson missing the first 7 games with recovering from his ACL and MCL surgery, the Vikings were relatively a very healthy team compared to a lot of other teams. They didn't have key players missing multiple games, a game here and there, like Aaron Jones missed, like Harrison Smith missed a couple, Blake Cashman missed a couple, but other than that, not a whole lot of key players who missed a lot of time. That is a type of injury luck that some teams last year did not enjoy. The Detroit Lions come to mind. They had a shit ton of injuries on the defensive side of the ball, and that ended up scuttling what was a dream season for them. We saw how their defense could not stop anybody on the commies in that, not a shocking first round loss, but not a loss you see very often from the number one seed in the NFC. And I think the injuries on defense piled up and were the big reason why the Lions lost and were a one and done playoff team. If the Vikings get that kind of injury luck in 2025, it's going to be very difficult for them to, again, challenge for an NFC championship and go to the Super Bowl like we think they should or should be challenging for with the roster that they have right now. Now, the Vikings have had, with Terrell Williams being the head of player health and all of that, and KLC have had been very good at managing injuries for the Vikings in the 3 years, but there is some luck to that too. And if Vikings don't get good injury luck in 2025, I think it'll make making the playoffs 2 years in a row very tough, and that'll derail the movement into the elite status, even with the moves that we have made in this offseason. So that's one factor. Second factor, I think that's going to be important to the Vikings making the playoffs again 2 years in a row and getting to that elite status, I think, is improving the running game. This has been a focus for the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell, and they did things to address it on the roster. You sign Ryan Kelly at center. You sign Will Fries to be your starting right guard. And then you draft Donovan Jackson to be your starting left guard, to fortify that offensive line, which has excellent offensive tackles at the left and the right side in Brian O'Neill and Christian Darrisaw. So they did that. They also traded for Jordan Mason to work with in tandem with Aaron Jones. And Mason is a guy who's a tough runner and a different kind of runner than Aaron Jones and could potentially give the Vikings more success in the running game. And last year, and during KLC's time in the Vikings, it's been well documented. Running efficiently has not been a strength for this team. 29th in 2022, 25th in 2023, last year 22nd in expected points added through the run. Also, 75% of their runs in the low red zone, which I think is like 10 yards and in, generated 0 yards before contact for all rushing attempts. And then last year, even though they improved, they were still only 19th in the NFL in total rushing yards. So those are a lot of not very good statistics for the running game. But again, the Vikings made a big commitment to improve the interior of the offensive line. I think that's going to help. Jordan Mason, who's known, he's got analytics show that he's very effective, great contact balance, can generate yards after contact, a very tough runner who can get the tough yards. Maybe he'll improve himself, will add more juice to the Vikings in the short yardage situations and in the red zone running and be more effective there. And if those things can translate, Dave, it just makes the offense, I think, more dangerous. They won't be so reliant on the pass. They won't be so reliant on big plays in the passing game to move the football. There'll be less 3 and outs. And it's also going to help J.J. McCarthy in his first season as a starting quarterback in the NFL, that the Vikings don't have to depend on him slinging the ball 40 times per game to move the offense and create long sustaining drives. We'll be able to control the ball more, less 3 and outs. The defense won't be on the field as much if the running game improves and becomes more efficient. And it's also going to help J.J. McCarthy, I think, particularly in the first few games of the season where there's going to be some time where he's going to have to adjust to the NFL level and sort of ease his way into being a pro starting quarterback. And I think a strong running game is going to be his best friend. So that is going to be something very important to the Vikings being successful next year, repeating as a playoff, a playoff appearance, and getting to that elite level. I think a third thing that's important, Dave, is Vikings defense. I love Brian Flores. You love him. We call him the maestro on this show. He's done an outstanding job with this defense in taking what was one of the league's worst units under Ed Donahill in 2022 and since 2023, turning it into a top 5 unit in the NFL, one that's an asset to the Vikings, not a deficit. But if there's one thing that's kind of funny about that, is that if there's one thing that he hasn't done well, is the Vikings have a nasty habit defensive wise of like playing lights out in the first half, and then somehow in the third quarter, sometimes in the fourth quarter, yeah, they start giving up gobs of yards, gobs of big plays, all kinds of points, and they turn what should be a blowout or a comfortable win for the Vikings into a nail biter and sometimes a loss. We saw it in both Green Bay games last year. We saw it in the Cincinnati game at the end of 2023 in a must-have-it win where they let Jake Browning, rip us to shreds in the second half when he'd done nothing in the first half. And that has been I think something that's really held back the Vikings defense at times. And yes, the Vikings addressed this in free agency as particularly and well, they, by signing Jonathan Allen, by signing Javon Hargrave to fortify the interior of the defensive line, by re-signing Byron Murphy Jr., by signing that guy, Isaiah Rodgers. So they've done things to address the defensive side of things. And if those 3 additions and the re-signing of Murphy, I think if they work in tandem with Flores working on new intricacies to his defense and how he blitzes and how he runs things, if that can take the defense from top 5 to, if they can cut out that, whatever those, when they go to sleep in the third and fourth quarters and be shut down, lights out most of the game, you take a defense that's top 5 and you probably turn it into a defense that's perhaps the best in the NFL. And that, again, is going to be a huge benefit to the Vikings and make them more dangerous as a team. It's going to help the offense because they get the ball back quicker, more times, and get to, work on scoring more points. So I think that's a big factor to the Vikings having success in 2025, getting back to the playoffs for again, and challenging for an NFC championship in a Super Bowl. Last factor, touched on it in the second factor, is, let's face it, this is all about JJ McCarthy, right? Like, when I talked about the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs, particularly being elite teams, well, what do they have that makes them elite? Well, they've got 2 of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Pat Mahomes and Josh Allen cover up for a whole bunch of dark spots on your team. They can cover up for when the rest of the team isn't playing well. They can just do their Pat Mahomes and Josh Allen amazing things and bail out their team. Now, I'm not expecting JJ McCarthy to do that, particularly in year 1, but he does have to play at a pretty high level, I think, and quickly establish himself as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, again, for the Vikings to get to an elite level and be a consistent playoff contender year after year, where, not taking this 1 year you make the playoffs and then 1 year you don't, or 2 years you don't. It's up to JJ McCarthy to play at the level. We think highly of him, Dave. We think that he is going to be the guy, but he still has to go out and be the guy. And until he does that, and if he doesn't do that, then again, it's going to be very difficult for as good a coach as Kevin O'Connell is and as great a QB whisperer and team culture guy as he is. If he doesn't get the quarterback play from JJ McCarthy that they expect, the Vikings are not going to get to the elite level. Now, I think JJ McCarthy is going to be that guy, but again, he's got to do it on the field.
Oh, without a doubt. And Kevin O'Connell's got to make it happen. And whether it's T-Bass saying the going to sleep was failure to adjust, I'm not quite so sure about that. It may take them longer because there's adjustments on both sides, and then you're readjusting, and it's a deal. But it seems like everybody's momentum, and people say momentum's not real. Momentum is real in football. You can feel it in the stands. When the home crowd goes quiet, it's never good, right?
Yeah.
You wanted to feed off of that, and that is always, a big deal. Daniel talks about round bellies should help JJ. Oh, yes. Round bellies help any quarterback. I don't care who it is. They help the quarterback. And we talked about Pat Mahomes. Pat Mahomes obviously been to the playoffs 10 years in a row. That's amazing. He went to the Super Bowl, I believe, his first year starting. which would be if JJ did it this year. He's been there with good offensive lines, and he's been there with bad offensive lines.
Mm-hmm.
And generally with the bad offensive lines, they lost. With the good offensive lines, they won. And Kansas City has gone through and had to buy new offensive lines, free agents and stuff, to get back up to where they needed to be. And so we just did that this offseason with Kelly and the young kid. So, Fries, it is something that I think it is a lesson that KOC has learned and hopefully will stick, because if you build up at the trenches where the game starts, right, with the big round bellies on either side, and they are good, you're generally going to win a lot of football games. Throw in a quarterback that is truly a franchise quarterback, Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, franchise quarterback. You have Jalen Hurts as a franchise quarterback, and you surround him. And Jalen Hurts is probably the primary example of what happens when you build the lines around him. You get success. I think the Vikings have done just that this season, barring catastrophic injury, like 2016 style of where everybody and their brother is going to the hospital. I think it is a good thing, and that we can reach that. Now, reaching that goal is, getting the playoffs, winning playoff games, hopefully going to the Super Bowl, at least, win the NFC North, go to the NFC Championship game, hopefully to the Super Bowl and winning it, and we'll see. But to do it over a long period of time will truly be the judgment of whether Kevin O'Connell can be elite or not. Hopefully he's learned the lessons in that first few seasons, and that's what you got to hope for. Everybody grows. Everybody makes mistakes, especially when they're, this is my first time doing this. It'll work out, and I hope it does. Everything looks like it's set up to do just that, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, they've addressed weaknesses this offseason, and they pick players that on paper make complete sense for for addressing those weaknesses. Will it work? Yeah, we don't know, but I think you can't argue with the process the Vikings did, particularly in free agency, on attacking those weaknesses. And yeah, now it's up to the players to perform and the coaches to get them in the position where they can perform that way.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and we'll find out, just not soon enough. I can't wait till they get pads on and start hitting, and we finally get to some games. And Dalton says, yeah, we're finally out of the Kirk Cousins era. Thankfully, Dalton, that is true. All right, now on to theme 2. Oops. Not quite. Oh, that's why.
There yet.
Didn't blank out all. This week in Vikings land.
Yeah, if you got 3 topics to go at here, and the first one is just a rookie minicamp was this weekend. Vikings wrapped it up today, or are in the process of wrapping it up, and they had 51. It was reported 51 prospects out for this. All their 5 draft picks. They had all 20 of their undrafted rookie free agent class, 20 kids on the rookie tryout, and then there was another 6 second-year players who didn't play last year at all, who also got back. And it's common for second-year players who, again, didn't play because of injury or whatever, that they attend this rookie minicamp because they want to get some extra work in. The coaches want to see them a bit more, and all of that. But what was noteworthy is that everybody was wondering, was JJ McCarthy, who didn't play last year and is a second-year guy and would be eligible to do this, would he be amongst that that group that came to the rookie minicamp. Well, he was not there. And of course, from here on in, anything that JJ McCarthy does or doesn't do is going to get reported on, and we're going to make a big deal about it or not. I think, and this is just speculation on my part, that McCarthy not being at the minicamp is actually a good sign for McCarthy, because I think if he had looked in the limited off-season work that they've done so far, if he looked rusty or didn't look sharp, that the Vikings might have been tempted to have him attend the rookie minicamp this week to get more reps and clean up some things. He was not there, so I feel that's a good sign that his off season is going as the Vikings envisioned, and there haven't been any hiccups, and he's looked good in the limited amount of time he's been on the turf or the grass, as Kevin O'Connell likes to say.
Right, and he addressed it this week on one of his many interviews that because rookie minicamp people are flying around with abandon because they're trying to make a team, that injuries do happen and can happen. He didn't want to risk him being out there for this. And we'll find out. It's just like Chicago Bears. They had drafted the wide receiver we were all looking at, Burton.
Yeah, Luther Burton.
Yeah, he got hurt day 2 of rookie minicamp. Some abdomen injury, but he was back out today. But I understand where KOC's coming from now. And that may tip. We talked about last week, how much time does he get in the preseason games?
Yeah.
And or joint practices. And if he's worried about getting hurt already, makes you wonder. But I understand this. I mean, this is a hodgepodge. You're not dealing with your normal starting lineups. Not, the ones and the twos and such like that during rookie minicamp. They're assembling. You got 51 guys, and it's got all right, all the offensive guys get over here, all the defensive guys get over here, specialists go over there, and it's that sort of thing.
Now, there are a few comments in there saying that Norpheus and such that they don't think JJ McCarthy was eligible to in rookie minicamp. That wasn't anything that I'd have to look at it. There wasn't anything that the beat reporters reported on saying that
he was, because he didn't play a regular season snap last year, is how I understand the rules.
But at any stretch, that's one take on it. However, as with this rookie minicamp, we're all looking for nuggets about, who looked good and who didn't. The media was only able to check out one day of this, as far as I could tell, and that was Friday. But Matthew Collar, he had a good rundown of this on YouTube. He had a YouTube video. You should check it out, where he talked about what he saw and players that he noticed, admitting that for the defensive players, there was actually probably no value in assessing them and the offensive linemen. It was really only the players throwing the ball and catching the ball that you could kind of make a determination and get an idea of what they look like. But the one guy that he mentioned, and he did a story on it, was that Max Brosmer, the former Golden Gopher, actually had a pretty good, at least good day Friday. And Brosmer is a guy that I think is an interesting dude, because initially I think we looked at him, undrafted rookie free agent. He's probably like fighting for, at best, practice squad situation, right? But the thing is, like, in his 4 years, if he had 4 years in New Hampshire, he absolutely killed it at New Hampshire in his last 2 years there. Mind you, that's at New Hampshire. It's not Div 1. But then when he transfers, he goes to the Golden Gophers last year, has a pretty solid year in Big 12. And so here's a kid. He's got decent size at 6'2", not really mobile, but he's got a strong arm, very smart, a kid, sees the game well, thinks it well. And Kevin O'Connell's been impressed by what he saw from him at Minnesota, at New Hampshire, and he was impressed with what he saw from him at the minicamp on Friday. And Brett Rippon, who the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell seem to like a lot as the number 3 guy, I don't think that his, it's the number 3 quarterback's his spot, so not somebody that you're expecting will ever get in an NFL game. But I don't think
You
that
hope
Rippon's got that. Yes, I don't think Rippon's got that spot locked up. I think Brosmer has an opportunity, particularly if he's looking and showing well in rookie minicamp, to get that number 3 spot and not be a practice roster guy. And the Vikings, I think it's good to have a young guy that you're developing, and that you can take some time to work on and get him into a pro. Now, the list of undrafted guys who became anything at all at the NFL level is very, very minimal. The most recent one that I can think of is actually the former Viking Taylor Heineken Beer, who's started numerous games in the NFL during his career, just not with the Vikings. But most of the time, these guys don't get on the field at all. But Brosmer, just somebody to keep an eye on, somebody that is going to be a work in progress that maybe we can develop, over 2 or 3 years to a point where maybe he can become a guy who can be like Heineke, play games and actually win you some games. But just an interesting guy. I'm rooting for him because of the fact that, again, he wasn't drafted, but there is some promise there. And it's names like this that make the offseason interesting, Dave, because, you're looking at players with promise like this who aren't we're not a bonus baby first rounder, but end up contributing to the Vikings in some way, shape, or form. And maybe Brosmer in 2027 or 2028 is that kind of guy.
Could be. I saw one graphic posted by a friend, Ted Glover, today, that out of all the number 1 draft picks, only 12 have made the Hall of Fame. Now, it said there are more undrafted free agents that have made the Hall of Fame. It's like 14. Since the draft started or whatever, the new era. But now there's a lot more undrafted free agents that get selected to play, and then, it's a bigger pool. But it's an interesting stat. And we've had ours that did it. So who knows? I haven't seen him. I watched a little bit of a Gophers game or 2 this year, but that was it. And I figured, Gophers, right? I was looking at their tight end. But hey, if he makes it, if he can make the backup, I don't know if he's going to get the number 3 job.
Yeah.
I think KOC values experience, and Rippon does have some game experience. But I fully see him keeping him on the practice squad minimum just to develop the kid. And from what I gather, he's got some skills. So, and if he stands out today, that's a good way to make the team. Now, he's going to get paid anyways. His money was guaranteed or whatever. I heard $250,000 or whatever. So he's getting a payday. Good for him. But you want to make the team and make that contract a lot higher. You want the minimums, not just the minimum UDFA pay. You want a minimum player pay. So even if it is rookie pay. And let's see. Let's see if he makes the roster.
For sure. Moving on to non-rookie camp stuff, but talk running game again. And the whole, Kevin O'Connell, he talked about it recently. One of his focuses this season is to do as much as he loved what Aaron Jones did for the Vikings last year, and we did too, that he wants to take some of the load off of him and have the running game be more efficient. Again, what the Vikings did on addressing the interior of the offensive line was part of that, but then trading for Jordan Mason was another part of that. I am interested in how the Vikings are going to deal with the workload between Jones and Mason in 2025, because last year, Dave, when Aaron Jones was not in the game, the Vikings offense, it didn't look right. And it was tough to get him off the field. They just didn't seem to be as effective or as explosive when Aaron Jones was not in the game. Well, but still, and Aaron Jones had the most career rushing attempts he's had in his 8 NFL seasons. I think he had 255 carries. Despite that, though, Dave, there was only and he played all 17 games last year. There was only 3 games last year of those 17 where he had 20 or more carries, and he never had any more than 22 carries in a game. That is not exactly Adrian Peterson 2012 or 2015 kind of workhorse workload.
No, that's not bell cow numbers. Bell cow numbers,
No.
you're 35, 40 carries a game. Yeah.
Exactly. So, part of that was that the Vikings weren't effective running the ball, so they would pass the ball to move the ball types things. But I still wonder, how effective, running backs, Dave, they need to get carries to, I think, get into the game and really make an impact. And Jordan Mason, if he's your number 2 running back or 1B running back, I don't think he's going to have much of an impact if he's only averaging 6 or 7 yards rushes a game, which is what basically Cam Akers was doing at the end of the season when he was the number 2 running back for the Vikings. So I'm wondering how they're going to do this and how they're going to split things. I think that the good thing is that, again, it was only last year that he got his extensive playing time. But again, he was very efficient as a runner, one of the most efficient runners in the NFL, one of the best at creating yards after contact and grinding out the tough runs. So I think that the Vikings will trust him more to take some of the load off of Jones than maybe they trusted Cam Akers and Ty Chandler. I think they're going to feel more comfortable giving Mason, more equitable split of the carries. And so that might be part of it, but also because Mason is better than Chandler or Cam Akers and is more effective. Again, it'll lead to a better offense, an offense that's able to, again, churn out those long 12, 14 play drives and create more carry opportunities for both Mason and Jones than what they had last year. But until they do it again, they've got to do it. And I still kind of wonder how the Vikings are going to attack this with splitting up the carries, or if they are going to split it up, or if Jones is still going to be the main guy getting the bulk of the carries, 65 to 70%, and Mason gets the other 35 to 30, 30 to 35%. It's something we got to monitor and see how that goes.
Well, I know KOC's pattern for running backs since he's been with the team is generally RB1 gets the first 2 series, RB3 or RB2 comes in for the 3rd series to give RB1 a breather, and then they work it from that. And when we had lack of talent at RB2, it caused a problem because whether it be Ty Chandler, Cam Akers, or whomever, we know that KOC's running backs must be able to block, pass block. Now, Aaron Jones can pass block.
Yes.
He does it well, does it fine. But you need to be able to do more than just pass block. You got to be able to see the holes, move to the holes, do everything that's necessary as a running back, have vision. And we've had some running backs that don't have as good a vision as Aaron Jones or Dalvin Cook back in the day. It's and we've looked for that. Now, will Mason's a battering ram. He's a bully back. He likes to run over people, which is cool. Now, and the other thing to improve the running game is the big round bellies, of course. And Kevin O'Connell's made an effort that way too. We talked about it for the quarterback. Well, it's also the case for the running back. And he has done that. He's improved the room with the signing of Mason, the trading for Mason, and then with the new guys on the offensive line. So hopefully we can get positive yards, especially in the red zone where they had such a problem last year. Because if they can't get it in the red zone, then you got to go to throwing. And you throw out 5 receivers in a condensed area of the end zone, it gets crowded. And nothing but problems can happen from that. So hopefully it works.
Yes. All right.
Brings us to, he said what?
Just Tom Pelissero had a little nugget this week about the Daniel Jones and the Vikings situation, and talking about how the Vikings, they really wanted Daniel Jones back. They thought that as the backup, or allegedly competing with McCarthy for the number one job. And then they got the vibe, the feeling that Jones wasn't really all that committed to that anymore. And so they pulled whatever contract offer they had on Jones off the table. And in the end, Jones ended up signing with the Indianapolis Colts to compete for the starting job. Good on him. I guess I was just wanted to think on this from Daniel Jones' perspective, and just looking at it. And looking at it is it would have been solid for if the Vikings had been able to get Jones in the fold, sign him, and he would be, I think, I would have hoped would have been the veteran backup to JJ McCarthy, a Jones, a guy with a lot of starting experience, some of it good, some of it not so good, but still a lot of his starting experience, and a guy who's a talented athlete. That would have been a nice scenario. And the one that we were looking, I think Dave, you and I, we would have been quite happy with Jones as the backup quarterback. But I think if you're Daniel Jones, just looking at it, you're about to turn 28. You've always been a starter in the league since you joined it. You want to play. I think he looked at the Viking situation and saw that, okay, yeah, they're saying I'm going to compete with JJ McCarthy for the starting job, but really he has to be thinking the same thing we're thinking, is that McCarthy is the favorite here. And they picked him 10th overall, not to sit on the bench, but to play. And so I don't think that he saw a very clear path to being a starter in Minnesota, and he wants to play. So you look at the Indianapolis Colts situation, it's much different. There's a much clearer path there, I think, to him being a starter and playing in 2025 than there was in Minnesota, because you look at the Colts, not a bad team, but they last year anyway, but they suffered from, I think, bad quarterback play. And Anthony Richardson goes into this season, I think, as the starter with the Colts, but he's probably 2 stinkers away from getting benched in 2025, in which case Daniel Jones slides in there, and if he plays well, he's the starter going forward for the rest of the season and maybe beyond. So I think, again, for Jones, if he wants to play, and I think all pro athletes want to play and be the guy, the Colts was a much better situation for him, and there's a much clearer path to him beating out Richardson than there was to him beating out McCarthy in Minnesota, unless McCarthy either had a season-ending injury again, or he totally shits the bed in preseason and OTAs, which I don't anticipate happening at all. But we've already seen Anthony Richardson shit the bed quite a few times, also ask out of a game inexplicably. So
that was
for Jones, I think if I was him, it wasn't a difficult decision to sign with a team where you that aren't god awful, but also you have a very realistic shot to be the starting quarterback there, as opposed to Minnesota, where I don't think that was a realistic option.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think Daniel Jones made a business decision.
Yes.
He didn't go for the money because the Vikings reportedly offered him more than he got, and he got like $14 million. But he made a business decision. He thinks it's quicker to start again going to the Colts. I don't fault him for that, because I think this is JJ McCarthy's team, no matter what. Mm-hmm. And yes, JJ's unproven because he's yet to play a regular snap, but he is, drafted 10th overall, and he has all the talent in the world. So we will see, as I normally say. And hopefully for Jones, he made the correct decision, and hopefully he got enough out of the reclamation school just by observing and working in practice to help him get that, because, hey, I wish everybody success.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, T-Bass.
Yeah.
Tyler Fornes was heavy on Anthony Richardson, because he has some attributes that you would like in a QB. Now, will Anthony Richardson eventually be part of the KOC school for rehabbing quarterbacks? I have no idea, but we'll find out.
We do know KOC was, well, whispering sweet nothings into Richardson's ear at the end of the Colts-Vikings game last year, telling him how he still believed in him and how he's going to be a bad man in the league.
Mm-hmm. He
KOC,
sure did.
always working the room, the quarterback room anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he did. Well, that brings us to theme 3. The reality check.
Yeah, the Vikings, we're 2 weeks now from the Vikings having completed their, I think, what is their 64th draft in franchise history, something like that. 64th or 65th, something around those. So with that, and during that time, that we've gotten, again, the rundown on all the 5 draft selections that the Vikings had. Fans, draft gurus, media have all poured over, their strong points, their weaknesses, going over like what impact they could have with the Vikings this year and long term. And myself, Dave, when it comes to draft picks, I admit that I am probably like I am a glass is half full kind of guy. I'm always excited when the Vikings select these guys and thinking about what they could be as a Viking, and thinking that some of them, are they going to turn into Hall of Famers or, all pros or longtime starters? But the reality is, and this is why the reality check is, the reality is that most drafts do not generate more than 1 or 2 starters per class. A little bit more if you got a larger class. But a lot of these guys do not amount to a whole hell of a lot in the NFL. And so thinking about that, I decided I wanted to do a little bit of a research project on the Vikings' recent draft classes and to see what we can expect from the 5 guys that got drafted 2 weeks ago. And what I did was I looked over 10 drafts from 2012 to 2021 and looked at, a couple of things. Who developed into starters? And by starters, I meant players who had been, either, as best as I could ascertain from research, was guys who had been named starters at the start of the season or had beaten out a guy somewhere through the season, not guys who started games because of injury. You're a starter in that case out of necessity, not because you necessarily earned it. And the other thing I was looking at was, did these draftees get offered and sign a second contract with the Vikings? So the Vikings determined that they were worth the money to bring back again for another go around with the Vikings. I think that those are on a base level. Those are the 2 things that showed that these draftees were worth it. Now, lots of people would have other ways of determining whether a player is worth it or not. I mean, you could not be a starter and still play, a pretty important role on special teams, or as a backup, as a nickel corner at times, or a 3rd or 4th wide receiver. So there's my metrics, if they were, they're a bit subjective, but they are what they are. you can agree.
Put somebody like Ed Ingram or some of the other linemen that we've drafted and we put in there, and we had to start them because we didn't have anybody better than they were as rookies. Type deal. And we know when it comes to linemen, the only way they can develop is in, full-blown games. So when you pick one high, did you count Ed Ingram?
Well, I didn't, because, just that 2012 to 2021 was the 10-year period I picked. And the reason I picked the reason 2021 was the cutoff date for me, just for everybody's awareness, is that's the most recent draft that I feel that where the players would be eligible to sign a second contract. So the 2022 draft, I don't think any of the draftees would be. They could be signed to an extension, but their time under the rookie contract is still up until this season, where be the last chance to sign them. So part of that is to point out is that, of course, 2021 was the last year that Rick Spielman was our general manager. None of these drafts are Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's drafts because of that rookie contract cutoff period that I put. I still think that the research that I did is worthwhile considering, because Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah is not proven yet in his 4 drafts that he's a better drafter than Rick Spielman. In fact, there's a little bit of evidence that he's worse than Rick Spielman there. But that story is still to be written. But anyway, I just think it shows still, if general managers whiff on drafts and they succeed on other drafts. That's been shown and demonstrated throughout the league,
including Rick Spielman.
Yeah, some are a little bit better than others, but nonetheless, I think that taking a look at a 10-year period is you see some trends there, good and bad. So anyway, going to get at it. Bear with me here. I got to look at my notes though, because there was a fair bit of numbers. But I guess the first thing is that about these draft picks over that 10-year period, by my tally, and I might have missed one. There's a few players where you interpret whether they're starters or not. It's a little bit different. But by my tally, 39. First off, the amount of draft picks during that 10-year period, there is 104. The Vikings drafted 104 players during that 10-year span. That's an average of just a smidge over 10 players per draft. Spielman never selected fewer than 8 players in any draft during this period, and 7 of those drafts saw him draft 10 players or more. So Spielman's draft philosophy, documented, was to take a lot of bites out of the apple. And my guess is that if I took the time to research this, I'd find the Vikings probably drafted the most players of any NFL team during this 10-year period. Now, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah has not been operating his drafts the same way. He's got the quality over quantity thing going, I think. But about these draft picks, by my tally, 39 of the 104 draftees became starters for the Vikings.
You also included a punter.
I did, yes. I that's one thing I forgot to mention. I included a punter and a kicker, Jeff Locke and Blair Walsh, as starters, because I feel that if you drafted them and they played that, they would have been the 2 guys doing those things. Even though they don't play a lot of snaps, they were, I don't know, I feel like they were starters at those positions. But 39 out of the 104 draftees became starters. 38% of the draftees out of that group became starters. That doesn't seem like a great amount, but I think that's probably about the usual. Not surprisingly, Dave, 56% of those 39 starters, 22 players, came from the first 3 rounds of the draft. So the other 17 players, 44%, came from rounds 4 to 7. Now, that seems like kind of a pretty even number, but keep in mind that during the 10-year period, the Vikings made just 29 picks in the first 3 rounds. That's only 28% of the total picks we had in the 10 drafts. The Vikings had 75 selections from round 4 through 7. That's 72% of the Minnesota draftees. So not shocking, but the ability of the Vikings to find starters in the first 3 rounds of the draft has been much, much better than on day 3 of the draft. Shocker.
And I'm sure that applies across the league.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sure it does too. Only 23 of the players they drafted from rounds 4 through 7 during this period became starters. There we go. So I think it's also not surprising is that, the vast majority of the first and second rounders that we picked, they almost always were named or became starters during their time with the Vikings. 12 of the 14 first rounders from 2012 to 2021 became starters, and 5 of the 6 second rounders became starters. As far as the first rounders, only Jeff Gladney and the great, and I say that with great sarcasm, Laquan Treadwell, they were the only first rounders who never became starters during that time frame. Now, Gladney, of course, didn't have only 1 year with the Vikings, and then he got kicked off the team for domestic assault charges. But neither of them became starters despite being drafted in the first round. And Mackenzie Alexander, the corner, is the only second rounder during that time who never became a starter. To be fair to him, he played a lot of snaps as a nickel corner, but was never a starter named or beat somebody out. As far as the second contract thing, I think as far as these draftees signing second contracts with the Vikings, the percentages dip even lower. Only 18 of the 104 players that got drafted got that second contract. That's 17% of the draftees. So takeaway here, less than 20% of the draftees over these 10 drafts were with the team by the time they got their second NFL contract. They'd moved on. And I think that just shows kind of the high rate of roster churn and attrition that happens in the NFL. And again, most of the guys signed to second contracts were day one or day two picks, 11 of the 18 from there. So, strangely enough, I think the only seventh rounder during the 10 drafts to become a starter and earn a second contract with the Vikings, and the Vikings made a lot of selections in the seventh round during this period, 25, in fact.
Shamar, because we know Spielman loved to own the seventh round.
Yeah, we had 4 of them one year. But defensive tackle Shamar Stephen is the only seventh rounder during that period to be named a starter and to get a second contract. So I think if you're looking at the 2025 draft, Dave, the takeaway here is chances are Donovan Jackson in particular, and maybe Ty Felton, who are the 2 top picks of the draft, they're the ones that recent history shows have the best chance of becoming starters and playing, having a major impact on the team, and the Vikings signing them to a second contract beyond their entry-level contracts. Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, Gavin Bartholomew, Kobe King. We heard lots of good things about all 3 of these day 3 selections, but the odds of them having the impact that Jackson will likely have, or even Felton will have, are pretty remote based on the 10-year survey that I did. So that's your reality check if you needed a dose of reality today.
Hey, I've shown my ski jump graph. Yeah. It makes sense. First rounders, it's 50 to 60%, I think, make it somewhere in there. And then it drops to like 20% in the second, and then it's even further in the third and goes on down. Biggs, yes, I did see it. And if the games, switching the subject real quick, if the overseas games are as rumored, where we play Pittsburgh Steelers on the 28th of September in Dublin and go over to London to play the Cleveland Browns the following week, both those games are designated away games on our schedule, which is cool. We keep all the 8 home games this season. We'll have, actually at that point, 7 away games and 2 neutral site games, because there's a difference between playing the Steelers in Dublin versus playing them in Three River Stadium. And so those are away games. And if it is a home game, which it isn't this year, but if it was like last year, I think home season ticket holders get either a discount if they want it to go overseas, or they get their money back for that lost game. But that's the answer to your question, Biggs.
T-Bass asking about when does O'Connell get held accountable for the playoff losses. And I think that probably the grace period is ended after the blowout to the Rams this year. I think that if they make the playoffs again and they get a big time thumping and don't win, that there's going to be some questions asked about O'Connell, and if his way of coaching the team is, it works great in the regular season, but what about the playoffs, buddy? When are you going to be do like your buddy Sean McVay and take a team on a deep playoff run and get to a Super Bowl and win it? So I think with just about all NFL coaches, the honeymoon period is pretty short. It's helped when you have great success in the regular season, like Kevin O'Connell has had in 2 of the 3 seasons that he's been head coach. But Danny Green faced it too, right? Like he got the Vikings into the playoffs almost every year as the head coach, but could win a playoff game until they had that miraculous comeback in the Meadowlands back in, what was it, 1996, I think it was,
Okay.
or 97. No, I think it was 97 actually. But yeah, questions are going to be asked, and I agree, T-Bass, that at some point you got to, if he doesn't have playoff success, that you got to start thinking about, what's going on here, and is he the right guy for the Vikings as the head coach to lead them to the promised land? Because that's what we all want.
Mm-hmm. T-Bass, I did a study when we were talking about Zimmer on most head coaches that win Super Bowls do it within the first 5 years. I think there was only like 2 that did it after that. So if you get beyond the 5-year point without something drastic happening to the team's wiped out due to airplane collision or something like that, I think that's when the questions really start.
And there's that stat that we've seen, Dave, where no NFL head coach has won a Super Bowl with the team, with the team that, if they've been with the team for 7 years and they haven't won it, they never have won it. Mm-hmm. Which leads to the thing that, well, you should get rid of the guy, as good as he is, if he hasn't won a Super Bowl within 7 years.
But I agree with you, Darren, that, hey, his excuses are used up. Mm-hmm. We had Kirk Cousins, rookie head coach, and then the injury year where everybody went, and Kirk Cousins popped his Achilles, and then, we had to Pasternaut and went through all that garbage. And then last year he made Sam Darnold, get paid, which is great. Now let's see him do it with his hand-selected drafted QB. And I think that's where it'll make the difference. But
now
T-Bass, he's on the clock. It's now put up or shut up time, basically.
Although having the second-year guy who's never started an NFL game as your rookie quarterback, I think probably gives you a built-in excuse there as well, Dave.
But it's not going to be much when you've built the team, maybe. Both offense and defense. You addressed all the problem areas, or the majority of the problem areas. There was no, absolutely got to have drafty in the first round stuff. No, your excuse list or available possible excuse list has gotten a whole lot shorter, and it's time to for that eval. So we'll see. Do you get promoted or do you not in the military? It was simple things, Did you study for the test? Did you improve? If not, you got passed over. You get passed over enough, done.
Yeah. And the NFL is
it's early kinetic, but the whole idea of T-Bass is, when do you start discussions? We're not at that point yet. I was just setting parameters. So,
yep,
it is what it is. I think Donovan Jackson has got the most chance of being a starter and being a quality player. Hopefully Ty Felton will fall into that, but he's a third rounder at the end of the third round.
Yeah.
So
comp pick third rounder. Yeah. Really a fourth rounder. And
it is what it is. Now, do we expect, we got 5 draft picks this year. If you take 2 of them, develop into starters, you're already at that level that you would expect, I would think. If you get a third, and by starter, you got to go also by where they were picked. What does it mean? Now, if you're Stephon Diggs, who got selected in the 5th round and turns into an all-pro, great. Outstanding. Most fifth rounders stink. Don't even make, some don't even make the team. Mm-hmm. It is what it is. And it's just, out of these guys, we hope all of them make the team. And being drafted, they probably will. But we hope they all develop into good quality players that work their way onto a second contract with the Vikings, because that will mean they made it. Not just a second contract with somebody else, which I worry about Bartholomew, because like I said, tight ends usually you draft them for their next team, but we shall see. Brian has a good say. Bartholomew has a good chance. Oliver is his competition. He's not going to beat Oliver this year. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. I think you're going to be dreaming if that's the case. I don't think any of these rookie tight ends, and I like Urasek as well, and Nesbitt's got a great story. If you want to hear about Nesbitt's story, listen to Luke Braun, Locked on Vikings. He did the whole series and get to know these guys, and he did it on Nesbitt, and Nesbitt was awesome. But
so Delton, are you telling me that sorry, Dave, that Delton, are you telling us that Kobe Kings is taking Ivan Pace Jr. out of the starting lineup? Because he ain't taking Blake Cashman's spot. And I don't know. I'd be very surprised if that happens. But hey.
Hey, but it's possible. Anything's possible.
It is possible.
They could step up and make a case for himself. Ivan Pace stepped up and made a case for himself, which was great. Right?
Yes. Very great.
As a UDFA. That was fantastic. So we'll see. I joked in the introduction that, hey, all of them are going to be Hall of Famers someday. That would be absolutely awesome, but don't expect it. Expect one very good starter, another starter, and maybe a third. And then that's probably about it out of this draft class. But we'll see when we're talking reality checks.
Yeah. And you can not be a starter, as I said, and still have play a sizable role in the team. And one example is Patrick Jones III, never a starter, picked in the third round, but played the last 2 years, over 50% of the defensive snaps, was the third edge rusher, third edge rusher, the cleanup guy, but just not good enough in the Vikings estimation and in mine to be, get offered a second contract with the Vikings. But he developed over his 4 years with the Vikings and became a guy who was an important contributor to the Vikings defense the last 2 years that he was on the team. So not a wasted draft pick by any stretch. And, sometimes that's the way it goes. Cam Bynum, hey, he just priced himself out of Minnesota, and our safety room was deep enough that we decided it was better value for the money to go with Theo Jackson than to re-sign him. But,
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how these guys develop, because we know it started off rough under Kwesi. And the question is it getting better? And we hope it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because we talked about the 3 buckets where you get players. You need the draft to be probably the major bucket, especially when you start to have to pay a quarterback. It's got to be that way.
Yes.
So,
yep.
Well, folks, I want to thank everybody that's joined us today. It's wonderful to see you. And if you haven't already, wish your mother a happy Mother's Day. And with mine, she's up in heaven, so I'll see her. I hope she's having a good day. I'm assuming so. And with that, any last words there, Darren?
I don't know, Dave. I just appreciate everybody taking some time out of their Sunday to join us today and talk Vikings football again.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see you next week. Same time, same place.
Yeah, and hopefully I'll be in the new house. And if you missed it at the beginning, I'm still waiting on the moving company to get a truck to coordinate the move. They said all their trucks are out, and until one comes back, all my furniture sits in Austin. So, but I can't wait. Already doing little things to set up the studio in the new house. We'll see how it goes. Got to mow tomorrow morning, though. Going to be fun. Try to beat the rain.
Oh yeah. Have you got all the pillows up on the wall, Dave? The sound stuff all done? No.
Mm-mm. Just started put up some curtains on one wall to deaden it. I've still got to get some sound absorption deal for behind me. And then all the sound absorbent stuff I have already, put that up across in the different spots that's needed. And it's basically 90-degree surface in front of where your voice is, 90 in front, 90 in back, 90 to the sides, and 90 above. And because the floor is carpeted, that's covered.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, but it's all with the movers, which is frustrating.
Hell yeah.
But with that, what do we say, brother?
We say SKOL Vikings, baby. Thanks for watching.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcast as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!